Today I am talking to Elliot Roxby of OurDogsLife. That's OurDogsLife.co.uk, and it's worthwhile while we have this conversation just look up the website so you have a bit of an understanding what we're talking about. Elliot I've known for a while. He is 27 years old, a big boy now, big L, and here to talk about his business and his entrepreneurial journey, and looking forward to getting started. So, without further ado, Elliot, you have been building a business for the last couple of years, and you have turned it into a almost multi-million pound company in a couple of years, and we'll come on to that. But I guess the first thing that we want to ask you, look at me like that, how did you come up with the idea, and also why entrepreneurship?
Well, firstly, I would just like to say thanks for inviting me on.
It's a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to see each other.
He means that.
In terms of the question, why entrepreneurship, I think there was never really an alternative for me.
Talk to me.
That's the short answer. Do you want the long answer?
No, I mean that'll do, won't it? No, but why choose this over getting a job, over anything else? Because it's incredibly hard, as I'm sure we'll talk about as we go through. Why choose this path for your life?
I think
what's the driver? One
of the first presents that I was bought was from my auntie, and it was Alan Sugar's book. And I think that was probably one of the only books I read within about a 10-year period. And off the back of that, I was then at lunchtime trying to sell phone cases to teachers, Xbox games to my mates, fizzy drinks, lunchtimes, that kind of thing. So I ended up building this little bit of a personality that was a bit of a Dell boy, so I was always up to something. So naturally, as I got older, it was a case of I was going to run a business. It was just a matter of what.
I quite like that, little Dell rather than little L.
Yeah.
That works quite nicely.
Like you go to like my auntie's birthday party, and everyone's like, "Oh, what you got to sell?" And I'm like, "Cause my mum's a hairdresser." It's quite fun. I got so many funny stories. My mum's a hairdresser, so I would be on eBay, and I bought like 50 of these L'Oreal lipsticks, for example.
Of course you did.
And my mum's sitting there in the kitchen cutting her friend's hair, and then I'm through being like, "Oh, dude, would you want a lipstick on the way out?" and stuff. So I got to be very thankful to my parents being able to put up with me for all kinds of things. There was one time, my old man, bless him, bear in mind he's a firefighter, so he's fucking shattered all the time. I went on Vistaprint and created these window cleaning. It's a window cleaning business because you obviously had to be over 16 to have a proper business. And I went around the estate putting these window cleaning cards through with his name on. We got a load of inquiries. He was like, "Mate, I don't have the time to do it." And I was like, "No, I'll do it. It just has to be under all your name." But yeah, I was always going to do something. I had too much energy.
So, okay, cool. So the entrepreneurial route, how did it begin? First of all, how did you get the idea? But how did you execute it? Because people listening who want to start a business or are just interested in like how to even get going, I think that's the thing that a lot of people say to me that I speak to that have ideas or whatever. They go, "Oh, I had an idea to do this, I had an idea to do that, but I didn't know how to start." So you obviously, first of all, you picked dogs. Was it pets? What kind of drove you to do that particular industry? Because it's quite specific.
For sure. So I think there's a couple of parts to that question. Firstly, I got my first job. I was very lucky to cut my teeth in a small business. I'm sure you won't mind me saying at the time, small business. I learnt the basics of how to sell something online in terms of what affects the conversion rates, all those kind of granular details. And the second part of that was I learnt how to go out onto the road and sell things to an independent garden centre. That kind of thing. So learning the ropes of selling as well as online sales. So naturally, it didn't take long for me to think I can do this myself now, and started looking for niches in the market where there was an opportunity. And one of those was I have a dog, love my dogs, a real lack of quality products that are out there in the market that people trust. So I just started launching products, and I think that is the most important thing. Is I never really lacked the urge to start, because I think you see people these days will want to sit in their room and try and formulate the perfect plan before they start, but it is just important to start. It's going to look rough and ready. The finished product in 6 months will look nothing like what you started with, but it's just that first jump.
And how did you make that very first jump? What was like the like, for example, where'd you get your money from?
Yeah.
How did that work?
Because that's important for a lot of people, especially coming from a working class background. People don't necessarily have the access to large amounts of capital to go out and be able to afford to lose 4 or 5 grand. So I got a Sainsbury's personal bank loan, which I lied through on the application. So hopefully there's no backlash off that. But personal loan, just started sending money to suppliers in China to get the ball rolling.
And it worked.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a long process. To say it's worked, I'm not so sure, because I think it's important. I don't sit here as someone who feels that they've achieved any level of like great success.
Yeah.
But I guess people who even are valued at X amount of millions, they necessarily don't feel like that anyway, because it's always about the next thing. So,
so you selected, what was your first product?
Dog whistle. What?
Just, are there not enough dog whistles out there already? I don't know what.
Ultrasonic, but it's called Wolf Whistle, which I thought was quite a nice name.
Very original. Okay. And how do you even go about sourcing that and doing that? I mean, was it a case of going on Alibaba.com and just was that how you was your kind of entry point?
Yeah, it was. And again, I mentioned I owe a lot to the job that I was in at the time. Adam he really pushed me to kind of certainly encourage me to pursue it as well. So I think that's important, to almost surround yourself with people that would encourage that kind of behaviour, opposed to people who are maybe more risk averse, to be like, oh, it's a bit of a waste of time. Why do you want to sell dog whistles for, that kind of thing? So I was very blessed in that sense.
Yeah,
I had a good starting point.
You're very lucky, because you talk about coming from a working class background, which almost certainly puts anybody at a disadvantage to perhaps somebody that might come from somewhere where they might have family money. But you were lucky to work for someone that kind of encouraged you to do that. Because I think for a lot of people that might be considering going on this journey, they'll have, like everyone else, they'll have a burn rate, so they'll have rent to pay, bills to pay. They need to support themselves. So then find a way of starting a business on the outside of that. It's really, really tough. So you need, I think it's helpful to have somebody in your ear kind of supporting in some way, whether it's a parent, whether it's a boss, whether it's a friend, whatever.
And for me, it wasn't just valuable in that sense in terms of his encouragement. It was more so the exposure to someone who is successful, who has got more money than I've ever seen. To put it into like actual terms, we would log on to the Amazon Seller Central, to where he was selling his brands, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, if he does, I'll have to crop it out, but it might have been £80,000 in the last 30 days. And I'm seeing that thinking, fuck me, what's going on here? Like, this is mental. And then also spending a lot of time with you, obviously.
The big cheese.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's ever fully learned life, have they? Not just talking about business, but even in it's like we talk about, tennis players and having a coach. I always thought that was kind of odd. Like, how does Novak Djokovic have a coach? But then I heard him talking about it, and I was like, oh, it makes complete sense. You absolutely need somebody who's been there and done it, who's watching what you're doing and commenting on it for you. It just doesn't make any sense not to have that. Great. So we've discussed how you sort of got going. So talk to me. You did the initial bit. You did the £5,000 loan, have you paid that off now?
Literally about 6 months ago. I think it was over like a 4 or 5 year term. So yeah.
Very nice. And then I guess that product must have worked, or given you the confidence to kind of, because what was the point when you were able to like stop working for your job and kind of go, actually, do you know what? I think I can actually support myself from what I'm doing here. So
it started off with just the one product. Then over about an 18-month period, I trialed so many products to where it wasn't a case of I've got a winning couple of products. It was a case of we've actually got a brand here that people like and there's an appetite for, which is really one of them moments where I thought, okay, it's really hard to get ahead in life, but I felt there was a bit of an opportunity now, like I was on a ladder. The second part of that was when I started to get interest from retailers, opposed to just one customer and one platform, which was Amazon. So then it was like, okay, in terms of a business, the risk is now at least spread over 2 different channels. So at that point, it was actually TK Maxx sent an email, it was around Christmas time, being like, we've seen your products on Amazon, we'd love to stock you.
Really?
Yeah. And then at that point I had to obviously have an adult conversation with Adam and say, listen, here's the opportunity, what do you think? And he was so good, he was like, mate, go for it. So it was at that point And
did they end up being the right kind of retailer to work with? Because I know that with them, it's very specific what works in their store and what doesn't.
It's funny.
Or would you rather no comment?
No, I'm happy to comment, because it's actually really funny to reflect the idea that I received those emails and thought, firstly, I thought, I fucking cracked it. Let's get the champers out. And then
Yeah,
secondly,
yeah.
I thought I'm actually equipped to do this, which in hindsight, there's a lot that goes into that, and that has to be managed properly. So if there was it never really worked out because the brand, myself, there was a few things that weren't ready. Whereas if that conversation was to come out now, would be much better place to fulfill that.
Did these retailers, they kind of came to you, or did you go seeking them out? Like,
So
did you have a business plan, or did you just were like, I'll just kind of see what happens. I've got these products, I'm putting them on. Because I mean, obviously being on things like Amazon, opportunities do come your way.
Amazon's a really good route to market for any business. For one like ours, it was good because it was a growing market, so you don't necessarily have to take off your competitors. You could just be there alongside them, and evolve from that point onwards. The second part of it, in terms of the retail side of it, I was David Brent. I had the dog supplies in the boot of the car, and I was driving around to garden centres, and I had a thought of like, I'll do it for a couple of weeks, see how many sales I get. Then the first thing I'm going to do is employ someone to do that, because of course I can't ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. But given the background I have with Adam,
Sure.
that was my job. So I was familiar with walking into a garden centre in Norfolk. I knew that these products would work, so I just had to prove it to myself a couple of times. I've still got the photos on my phone, the first ones I went to. And yeah, built it out from that point onwards. Got someone in. They spent a year of their time going around to garden centres up and down the country, and I think we got around maybe 200 garden centres ordering, or only small amounts, but it was a good start.
And at this point, you've taken your original £5,000 Sainsbury's loan, but how are you kind of growing and funding at this point? Is it self-sufficient? Are you having to kind of borrow?
Amazon lending. So if you're not familiar with the platform, within Seller Central, it will all work off an algorithm. So assuming that they see revenue coming in at a rate that isn't burning cash, they obviously assume you're profitable at that point, and they will lend against that. And at the time, some really favourable interest rates. It may have been like 2-3%, which is obviously really strong compared to now. It's a lot different. But a lot of our growth was funded using Amazon as a lending facility, which, if I want to say one thing to Barclays, I should have a relationship with my bank at that point, and most definitely should have a relationship now. But the way traditional banking work, especially throughout COVID, fucking horrendous. Just don't want to know you, or don't like make any effort. So people always talk bad on Amazon for a variety of reasons, but my life has changed because of them, for sure.
One thing that's really exciting for up and coming entrepreneurs, like anybody that wants to start a business now, which I didn't have access to when I started trying to do this in like the early noughties or whatever, there are now, like there never has been before, there's access to money and capital that there wasn't previously. So you can literally get, I mean, there's always risk, but you can get a personal loan, a couple of £1,000. And if the business works, and if you are able to sell online, that you will literally get hounded, won't you, by these companies that want to fund your growth. And you can now build a business without necessarily having to go to some rich person to get investment or anything else. And it's completely changed the game. I've used it in my business loads, and we've now got access to £100,000, whatever, plus, if we need it, loan from businesses, because they look at what you're selling and they're sort of hedging their bets that if they loan this to you, this 100 grand, and then they're going to get 110 back, they see that and it's almost like a snowball. The more that you borrow, the more that you grow, the more that you get offered. Let's talk about all the things that are going really well, because you've obviously got have a look, guys, on the website, because there's loads of cool stuff on there. Brand is hot,
Thank you,
it is, and it's selling well. Let's talk about the big highlights. So obviously, the fact that you got it off the ground must have been hugely satisfying. I know there was a little period where you went out, I think you got yourself a bit of a flash car and maybe a bit too expensive a haircut, and had a bit of a panic.
There's so many things like that, which I wouldn't change at all. I wouldn't change. But
talk me through the numbers then. So year 1, year 2, year 3, etc. Because the growth's great.
This is what I was going to say, is that because I have no prior experience in business and I'm learning as I go, I thought month-on-month growth is standard. I thought everything goes like a hockey
just
stick.
on an upward curve.
So I've had no prior experience, whereas now, because I've had a few bad episodes, I know that when those good times do come around, you should maybe celebrate them a little bit more and almost feel grateful that good is really good, compared to some of the bad months we've had. So just ask that question again, because I've kind of gone off topic.
Yeah, just what can you like think of the kind of the key highs? Because as you just said, I think it's very common in many elements of like life, business, whatever, is that everyone's working towards like a goal, aren't they?
Yep.
But if you see yourself almost getting there, so, well, in my experience as well, sometimes you find that by the time you actually get there and achieve it, you've already almost celebrated through it, and then it's just like, well, what's the next thing? So I guess where you are, if you'd known 4 years ago where you were today, you'd have absolutely loved it. But where you are right now, I already know you're looking at 10x where you want, like in terms of where you want to be. So it's like you're never kind of fully satisfied. But where were the key milestones? Just first of all, talk me through years 1, years 2, years 3, years 4 in terms of the growth of turnover.
So in terms of numbers, year 1 we done $250,000, which again, not having exposure to any money,
it's massive.
I'm in Norwich. I think I'm the cheese.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I'm the nuts.
I mean, from a £5,000 Sainsbury's loan to turn that into £250,000, I know it's not all profit or whatever, but I mean that's quite. It must have really taken off after a couple of months. You must have had a couple of products in there flying.
Yeah, you mentioned the milestones. It was when I hit £1,000 revenue a day. I thought, fucking hell, at that point I was like, we're onto something big here. So that was like a massive milestone that I had in my head. I always want to do £1,000. If I do £1,000 a day, I'll be happy. But obviously it doesn't work like that. Then the second year, head buried in my laptop, didn't really do much else outside of that. We done £750,000 revenue. Again, that's revenue, not net profit. So that
still 3x though, isn't it? 3x.
Good. Yeah. Good maths. And then the last financial year, we done 1.3 million. And within that, there was a lot more problems, which we can talk on in terms of, I think entrepreneurs have great revenue drivers, lots of energy, lots of activity. However, all of the things that keep a business growing out above that point and beyond, like the boring stuff, essentially, the processes, the inventory management, they're all things that I fucked up with, to be completely honest, which I now feel in good place to move on from. Yeah,
but I mean, it's only through sounds cliche, but it's only through making these mistakes that you learn. It's just, you just hope that it's not too costly a mistake that you can't bounce back from.
To lose momentum,
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that then, because I mean, obviously the growth's amazing. It's been profitable all the way through, I think it's fair to say.
In terms of EBITDA, profitable every year.
Yeah, which I mean again is phenomenal, because you look at most startups, I look at, and most of them are very loss making, and then they're like, but I'm building a brand, or I'm building an idea, and eventually it's going to work, and that's quite a hard story to sell to an investor or anyone else. But I remember you got yourself into a little bit of a pickle at one point, because I know you were running out of cash,
which I'm happy to talk about. If you want to touch on it.
Yeah.
The nuts and bolts of it essentially was COVID. As a byproduct of COVID, there was some logistic issue getting stock from all over the world. So we were selling, let's say, in January, we were doing about 150 grand revenue per month. And I'm making my plans based off the next 12 months, thinking, right, that'll be at a minimum 150 every month. But in order to do that, you have to have a certain amount of stock, a certain amount of cash tied up in stock, a certain amount of cash on the way to suppliers. So we just didn't have the planning to be able to hit those numbers month on month. Combine that with a freight forwarder, and a container basically got stuck in China for 2 months, and we were getting fined near enough. It was about, no joke, at one point it was like £800 a day. They were like threatening, which would just like ripping the life out of the business in terms of cash balances and whatnot. To be completely honest, I always take as much accountability and responsibility as possible, but this was a neglection from our suppliers that just didn't assign the right documentation. Obviously all boring stuff that everyone's going to love listening to.
No, but I think it's worth noting as well, and just explaining to people that don't know, that during COVID, to move a shipping container of goods from China to the UK had gone from about $1,800 up to nearly 15,000. It was like a kind of cartel moment, and no one really, I mean, now it's gone, it even went back down to below where it was before COVID at one point, but now it's stabilized again, but it's taken a bit of time. So you had different things come out of the pandemic, because on the one hand, loads of people bought dogs, and that business just boomed. So that was like a great thing. But then obviously you had the challenges that people like me and everyone else had, which was getting your product. So you got yourself in a pickle.
Yeah, combine that with a legal issue that is still, or finally been closed off, but I'm not sure how much I can talk about in all fairness, but it was costly in terms of, it would have been someone's yearly salary, that kind of thing, which in my stage of business, that kind of money is really better off used in stock. So those two issues combined put us in a position where, in order to maintain the momentum, which for me is really important, I do want to see the year-on-year growth every year, because again, when it comes to attracting investors, they don't want to see your growth start to mature at such an early stage. So I had to formulate how I'm going to get out of this pickle. And personally, at that point, it was all on top for me. And because the first 2 years, month-on-month growth, I'm thinking, something's up. And I think if I was to do that time again, I would ask for a lot more help, whereas I kind of brushed it aside, because I think when you're a founder, you're almost expected to know the answers to everything, aren't you?
Well, I don't know if that's completely true. Maybe that's how people feel. I think is that not just like bravado and stuff? I mean, that's part of the reason why we're doing this podcast, is to show people
definitely an element of ego, 1,000,000%.
It's hard when you're putting yourself out there, and I think it's building a business is very personal. So you feel like everyone's looking at you, and it's always you've always got to portray this element of, oh, it's been like really successful. I always find it really difficult. People go, how's the gas going? And I'm like, oh, like, do you want me to tell you? Because you're gonna have to sit here for an hour while I tell you what's going on, or do I just go, yeah, really good, thanks, and kind of move on? But anyway, so you got yourself in a pickle, and basically you had this great business. Yep. It was doing well, but you were running out of stock, and you didn't have the cash to fund the stock because you'd had a bit of a boo-boo there. So you decided to get an investor. Yeah, which so far as I know and have always known is incredibly difficult. But you managed it. So how did you do it?
Your advice, I think, mate, to be completely honest.
Definitely not.
I think you touched on it. The market that we're in is growing. A lot of investors will always want to invest in a growing market because of the point I touched on earlier. You're not taking market share off someone. You're just in a market that's growing, so you don't have to necessarily be beating competitors. Investors obviously want a story, want to see the plan. So within our business, we've been able to formulate a pitch deck, which people may or may not be familiar with the term pitch deck. You essentially lay out the bare bones of the story so far, and then the plan onwards, which is obviously what the invested funds will be used for. So we posted our pitch deck onto a platform called Angel Investment Network, which you're familiar with, right? I'm
familiar with it because of you, actually.
Yes, you are. You told me not to go on it, if you remember correctly. Son.
Well, I don't know if I said not to go on it, but I just remember thinking, like, yeah, this is a long shot. And turns out it wasn't at all.
It's like I say, it's essentially Tinder for investors to meet businesses at our level. I think I got 4 or 5 messages within the first couple of weeks. So again, I thought, okay, hot prospect. But because I have nothing to compare it to, I thought that was just normal. But then after speaking with you, it's like, okay.
I was mind blown.
Yeah, you're sitting on something quite tasty. So had the calls, had offers from all of them. Because it was a relatively time-sensitive issue, I knew I had to make a call, make a deal pretty quickly. I've managed to get an investor that is extremely experienced within business, but not necessarily just business, an industry that is very similar. And he wanted to dedicate some time to actually help build the business himself alongside other things. Because for me, the cash alone was worst case. I wanted someone to maybe help me in those situations that I touched on where things did get too much, to rely on someone who has like a vested interest on helping me. So yeah, I feel very, very, very fortunate.
Yeah, that's hugely useful. And we'll just talk just only very briefly about the different ways you can get investment. So we've talked about all these not banks, but companies that can loan capital now to businesses when you show them that you've got growth. But sometimes if you want to grow quick or large, you're never going to get, or it's very unlikely you'll get a loan unless you've got collateral, like a house that you want to put against it, that will give you the money to do that. So in your case, 300 grand, I think you were looking for. About that much?
400 grand.
400, fine. So you go out to an investor, and there's I am not in the process, or I'm not bigging up the government in any way, shape or form, but there is one quite good thing they have put together in the UK, and that is the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. I think that's what it's called, and otherwise known as SEIS, and then EIS, which is a similar but slightly different thing. And in a nutshell, what it is you go out and ask for £100,000 for 10% in your business, and you can get that money off that investor, and he can claim 50% of that cash back against his tax bill at the end of the year. Now you might think, who's got a tax bill that large? But obviously people who are investing in startups are, I mean, they're going to be multi-millionaires. It's not the kind of thing you're investing in unless you are, and they have huge tax bills. So for them, they're basically getting 50% off straight off the get-go. So very few investors are going to be interested in investing in your business if you don't have SCIS. And you can raise up to £250,000, up to 200 from one investor, I think, not the full 250. But anyway, you kind of get the idea. And then EIS up to 2 million, but the tax breaks are not quite so good. But there's also other tax breaks for them, like if the business goes bust, I think they can get another 30% back or something. So it is almost, I wouldn't say it's risk-free, but it is almost 80% off in a weird kind of way.
They get, in SCIS, they essentially get the equity for half price. And then also the additional benefit is that upon exit, so if you're to sell your shares, they don't get charged capital gains tax. Yeah. So from their perspective, it is a no-brainer.
It's phenomenally attractive. So obviously these people, I mean, I talk to wealthy people, and they will say to me, they'll go, I need to offset my SCIS before the end of this tax year. Do you know of any opportunities? So these people are out there literally looking for something to invest in. So it's not like you've got to convince them from a monetary standpoint. It's just, is your business the one where they go, yeah, I'll chuck it into that. So it's something that might seem really complicated when you kind of look it up online, but it's actually... I don't think it's quite so complicated. And there's businesses like Seed Legals.
I'd like to shout out Seed Legals, yeah, 1,000,000%. They were so helpful in terms of managing that whole process, because it is so daunting, especially if you've got no prior experience as to what that entails. They made that thing so easy. Yeah,
shout out the business that's absolutely smashing it and doesn't need any...
No, the founder, I messaged him on LinkedIn. It's a bit of a flex, isn't it, saying I'm chatting to the founder, but really nice chap. And I think they'll smash it in the next couple of years if they haven't already.
Yeah. It's a great platform. Okay, Brill. So you put it on this angel investment network. Investor came in. You got the dough, and life was great ever after.
We're away. Yeah, it was just a reset moment in terms of when I first started with a woof whistle. That wouldn't have been in the plans, but it was important that I never really had a plan, because things just typically don't go to plan. So I think when I reflect, it's just a constant case of resetting your ambition, and with that investment, I believe that what got me there won't get me to the next level. So it's now important for me to formulate the plan, so to speak, and actually have a plan this time to get to a level which, for us, when you reverse engineer what we want to be doing £10 million revenue a year. And in order to do that, that's going to take obviously a lot of hard work and a lot of horror stories, but I'm here for it now, and I feel in a good place to go out and get it.
And do you now have a sort of how do you plan to get there? Do you have like a formulated business plan, or are you just going to keep doing what you're doing? And
so in the short term, within the dog niche, our hero brand is OurDogsLife, typically around grooming and hygiene products, anything from dog toothpaste to ear cleaner, where we're trying to build healthy habits for dogs. So it's just a case of the way we grow this business in the short term in terms of driving revenue is just release new products. I looked at my laptop today, we've got 76 new products launching between now and January. So hopefully we'll see revenue spike and double the size of the business. With that, we then need to know if we're doubling the size of the profits, of course.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the short-term game plan. The long-term game plan is that we're not just going to be one brand. It's all going to sit under an umbrella of Our Pets Life. So there's a few brands that we have ready to roll. They're going to be in different niches, which dog poo bags, for example, would be one. Building a brand around compostable, fully biodegradable poo bags that have benefits for helping cleaning up the ocean. So that's going to be one of the brands.
He's actually already sold his first one to Paul.
Yeah, so on a subscription as well.
Yeah, subscription, please.
Yeah.
So that was hopefully answered your question.
And in order to get there, then, because you mentioned outside before we were chatting, you mentioned about you were going to probably raise money again.
Yeah, end of next year
to do that. Wow.
I think this process of going through that has really opened my eyes as to the opportunities that are there, based on what other opportunities are out there. Because anyone can go on Crowdcube and look at a company that's trying to raise 2 million and they haven't actually made a penny of profit in the last 3 years. So it's just been like a real really opened my eyes to what's out there and how we can fund our growth drastically and aggressively. At the back end of next year, we'll be looking to raise some cash again.
I think it's super exciting, and I'm very exciting for you. if you could pass on something to someone who is just starting, like you, who might be listening to this, what do you think you'd say to them? I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but are there any things that you'd look at and you'd be like, yeah, like, I mean, I can think of a few for myself. Mine would be, I never listened. I was very headstrong and very, very determined, arrogant, definitely. But I wish I had gone into industry like you did and actually just worked for someone a little bit, because I was always determined that I was never ever going to do that. And actually, in hindsight, that's something that I wish I'd done. So that's kind of my big one for people. How about you?
I think when I look back, one of the key drivers for me is always having friends and people close to me that would never be jealous or envious or hush any of my ambitions. I feel like they've really pushed me on and amplified anything I've ever wanted to do and encouraged me to do so. Same with Adam. I talked about how important he was for me. So I think, to coin a phrase, they say find your tribe. So you want to find people that are like-minded, because of course it makes everything 10 times harder if you're trying to pursue something and trying to get yourself out of your current circumstance, but people around you say that's a stupid idea, don't do that. Like, you're making it so hard. So with the content you can be consumed, let me start again. The content that you can consume, like this podcast, for example, it's never been easier to find people that will inspire you and motivate you. It's just then from that initial motivation, what the term is, when motivation fails, discipline prevails. So it's, anyone can listen to a podcast and get motivated. It's then you need to then go out and start. And when you start, it has to be every day. It has to take a significant amount of time before you get anywhere. So hopefully this answers your question. I think I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but
no, you haven't. I think that's another thing that's important to mention as well, is that despite what you might see online, nothing happens overnight. I mean,
yeah, especially with platforms we touched on earlier, LinkedIn. It's like that is your humble brag, and everyone is in the same boat of just highlight reeling what they've gone up to. But I think what you're doing here in terms of people being transparent about their journeys will really help people, because all you need is to hear it from a couple of people for it to, you almost have like a deep breath, like, okay, I'm not alone. It is normal. I think business is miserable, honestly.
Oh no, yeah, 100%. And I think in some ways we haven't touched on that quite enough.
Yeah.
What would you say was your worst moment? I mean, because I've got, they're just, I mean, I'll tell you mine. In my gas business, I bought. I originally started with carbonators, my own machines. Paul remembers this, and I found a supplier to work with for the gas, and the machine company sent me 2 machines, and the gas company sent me a load of cylinders. Connected them all up, and all worked a dream, so no issue. And then when I ordered my first 1,000 carbonators, I ordered 1,000 cylinders. I mean, this stuff's not cheap. Let's not beat about the bush. And I was very, very excited about it coming. People like, they look really cool, they're going to sell. And I didn't know, but I was quite confident. And the cylinders didn't work in the machine. Do you remember? And they were working, some of them were working, but a lot of them weren't. So I started getting was giving these machines out to friends and family, whatever. And obviously people take a while before they want to say something. And I remember I gave one to you and your wife or whatever. And you were like, how does it work, mate? Because I screwed it in and it just doesn't do anything. And I was thinking, I was really hoping, but I was thinking, he's not a Muppet and you're not a Muppet. And then Andrew, who worked for me in my other business, he suddenly said to me, it stopped working. And it was honestly the absolute worst, because I didn't have the cash, and I'd already got 6,000 cylinders on the water on their way over from the same supplier that I obviously fronted all the cash for. And at this point, it was everything I had pretty much that I'd kind of put into this. Anyway, very long story short, I was furious with the machine manufacturer, constantly telling them, look, your machines don't work properly, yada, yada. But then I started using a different brand of cylinder in those machines, and it worked 20 from 20. Then put my cylinders in, didn't work 20 from 20. I was thinking, what's going on here? And what had happened was, because of the pandemic, the cylinder supplier had sourced the same valve. So if you imagine it's like a jigsaw, so they're like, oh, it's exactly the same thread, it's exactly the same product, but they'd sourced a valve from a different supplier because they were struggling to get hold of the ones they sent to me on a sample, but they hadn't told me. And I went into this like builder's merchants, and he said, well, I tell you what, mate, we'll get like a digital tape measure with like an infrared beam or whatever, and we'll measure these perfectly, and we'll see if they're absolutely identical. And it was out by something like 0.4 of a millimeter, the valve from the other. And what had happened was it didn't work in the machine. And the only reason why this business has survived COTU pretty much is because, as luck would have it, the 6,000 that I had coming on the water had the correct valve in.
Amazing.
So luckily, these dodgy cylinders worked in every other machine except mine. I was able to sell them on Amazon without any issue at all, and they're still floating around. They're like they're like black with like blue stripes, and every now and then one turns up, and I'm like, ah, because it like gets returned to my warehouse. I'm like, get that thing out of my sight. But it was, I mean, I remember I got really low, and I was like, struggling to get out of bed and stuff, because I just thought, I was like, I fucked it. I was like, and it's not even my fault. And it's not even my fault. Anyway, thank God these cylinders came, and then they worked, and then it obviously steamrolled from there. So it was a happy ending to an extremely stressful 6 or 7 weeks all around Christmas. It was awful. How about you?
I've got so many, in all fairness, and all of them tend to derive around cash management, which I mentioned earlier. The boring stuff of the business has obviously, those issues have now been addressed, which is good to anyone listening who doesn't want to invest. Your money's safe. But at the time, about 2 years ago, I think me and the ex-missus just landed in Santorini, and the first email I got was, you owe 20 grand to your freight forwarder. If you don't pay it, we're going to pause all shipments, and that would have written us off. So I've had so many sobering moments where I'm either out enjoying my life, and I get an email being like, you owe X, or this has been held because of this. A funny story was a trade show we were going to. I've got 2 stories actually, so I'll pick the funnier one. It was in Germany, so the flight was going direct to Germany from Stansted. In Norwich. I thought in my head the flight was in the afternoon, so I'm getting ready, showered in the morning, checked my phone. Your flight leaves in half an hour. So obviously I'm like, right, so I fucked it. I'm then, like, this is a big trade show, a 4-day trade show. Yeah. I'm then checking the flights, thinking, bearing in mind, I'm taking my staff member out there, like, these are like moments for me that I'm like trying to save, like, my own business, I'm taking my own employee to a trade show for 4 days in Germany, like, this is amazing. Go out to shower, the flight's in half an hour, we're 2.5 hours away, so I'm on the back foot straight away. So going through Skyscanner thinking, what can be done, can we get out there today? Turns out we couldn't. The only flight the day after was from Heathrow to Switzerland, and then a change in Switzerland to Germany, so booked it. I think we're 900 quid down at this point. Oh well, we're still moving. Get to Heathrow, sitting in there, the flight's about 45 minutes delay, and I'm thinking, well, the transfer is 45 minutes, so this is going to be chaos. I'm sitting there like profusely sweating, not wanting to tell my staff member to, like, again, in hindsight, I was just like, mate, this is not my fault, but we're probably going to miss the transfer. Anyway, we're on the flight. Eventually, they come out and they put it on the tannoy, or whatever you call it. Anyone who has to transfer to Germany, they're going to hold that flight to make sure that you can then make it for 20 minutes. So, okay, we'll make it. As we're coming into land, emergency land comes back up. Sorry, hit the mic, comes back up. So at that point, I'm then just fearing for my life, thinking, not only have we missed the transfer, but we're going to be brown bread. And then the air hostess comes out and starts taking photos of the wings, which, fuck me, on a plane, anyone's doing that, you're banging trouble, aren't you?
Yeah, that's not great, is it?
So at that point, I'm like, mate, this has been the trip from hell. We're not even got there yet. Anyway, half an hour later, land, can't get the transfer. 8-hour train from Switzerland to wherever we needed to go in Germany with a couple of stops. On a trade show, obviously, you have one day where you just set up. We missed all of that. So we get there the next morning, super early, set up, and then the first person that we see serves me some legal letters saying, I've been waiting to see you. This is then the start of that legal issue. So it was a fucking nightmare, in all fairness.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably my favourite story.
I think it's also one thing that you talked about there, it's important to touch on, is when you start these businesses, and even when you're self-employed, it's with you all the time. And I think that's one thing that perhaps people can fall into a bit of a trap, be a little bit naive about this, is that you go and work for a business, you rock up at 9 a.m, you clock off at 5:30 p.m. And I'm not saying that every employee works like that, because some of them take their work home, etc. But basically, you have your life and you have your work. When you're doing this, the two become completely entangled, particularly because of these fuckers. you can never get away. So when you talk about rocking up in Santorini and you're getting an email, so you could be at, you could be at your best mate's wedding, anything like this, and you can get a piece of news and it can be devastating. So there's your mental health is like, it's hard.
It really is.
Really
I mean,
is hard.
I think we'd both agree that we wouldn't change it. I think that's clear to say. I would never moan about my circumstances. However, I think it definitely has strains on relationships because of course you can't switch off. You can't just sit there and watch something on Netflix and completely switch off when you know what's the actuality of what's going on behind you. So yeah, I think although I wouldn't change it, it's certainly definitely it's really challenging, but I always enjoy speaking with you and other founders where everyone's in the same position.
But you're better at this than me, but we both get the guilt. Everyone gets the guilt. In other words, you always feel like you should be working. So because as well, when you're not forced into certain hours, you might go to the gym one morning or you might take a morning off and go and meet a mate for coffee or whatever. And then you get the guilt. And so you have to learn to become really disciplined within yourself as to, am I doing enough? Because there's always something to be done because nothing's perfect, right? It's like it's never finished until it's sold. Or whatever it is you want to do with it, it's never finished. And that can, I have always found that a real battle as well. So, I spend my money going on expensive holidays. That's just what, in my family, we like to do, me and my partner and my daughter. But I do it and then I go and I'm like, it's very, very hard to completely switch off. And I think, I'm spending all this money and I'm working really hard so I can afford to do the thing that I enjoy because I don't like fast cars or anything like that. This is my thing. Mm-hmm. But then sometimes I'm there and it's just like, I can't, I have to get off the beach or, ski slope, whatever it is, and give up that day or whatever because I've got to go and sort this issue out. And I think that probably for most employees,
you're doing it right, ain't you? Ski slope and on the beach.
Well, no, I'm just saying, but that's where I spend my money. No matter where you come from, whether it's from the hardest, and many of the best entrepreneurs have come from the most difficult beginnings. I just think it's, in somewhere like the UK or any Western nation, yes, life is very tough and there aren't loads of opportunities for lots of people. But if you want it bad enough and if you're prepared to put the work in, this is possible for anybody to
I think it's never been easier.
And in some ways, it's never been easier, especially now people got the access to, to listening to other. Be careful with what you consume because like you were saying, there's a lot of peacocking out there. So like a lot of young lads that are going around going, I'm making loads of money in crypto or whatever. And the fact is that 99.9% of them won't be making any money at all. So be a little bit, and anybody, well, in my opinion, anyone that seems a little bit pleased with themselves, generally I kind of steer clear of those lads a little bit and their advice because it might not be fruitful. Anyone that's trying to sell you a course online as well, anyone, just relax. You don't need the online course to do this. Promise you. I'm sure some of them are good, but you don't need the online course to do this. It might be normally £9,999.99 and now it's only £50, but you don't need it. Don't buy it. Sorry, lads. Is that fair?
No, yeah, it's fair, I suppose, but I'm sure there are instances where those kind of courses do help people. That said, my course comes out next week. I've never been one for that, but then again, I've gone to paid networking events, dinners and whatnot, and it's like anything. You can find value in most things. I have a massive pet peeve, pardon the pun.
It's a good pun.
With what's the term? I think productivity porn, where you can just sit and listen to David Goggins or Alex Hormozy and feel like this is really stimulating and, I can relate to these people, but you're then not actually doing the hard work. You're not putting in the yard. So you've got to be careful with it. Although you have access to all of this content, I mean, you don't need me to tell you. People don't need me to tell you, but too much of anything is bad for you. Fortunately and unfortunately, whether you call it the curse or the whatever it was, you're always hungry for more. And that's why you see these guys, I forget his name, which is terrible, but the founder of Huel, for example, and he had a business before that, and I think I read he sold it for 40 something million or whatever, and I was just thinking, like, where's the incentive to go again?
And he I think he was saying he took 6 months off or something, and then he was like, I'm bored now, so I've got to go again. And
it's because people are in love with the process. Like I said to you before,
it's not just about the dough.
Of course it's nice. About for me, the idea of me wanting to become a multi-millionaire, although the dough is obviously lovely, it will be the process and the man that I become at the end of that can deal with things, has like a mental fortitude to just be solution based. Like for me, that is, if I'm going to talk on it, like I actually love the person I'm becoming to the point where I wouldn't want to swap lives with anyone if they had 10 times the amount of money than me. It's like, I think if you can surround yourself with people like that, you can then end up in a really good position in terms of friends, because you know that no one's ever going to be jealous or envious, because in my circumstance, all my friends are pursuing their own little things. I've got 2 friends that run a gym together. They're brothers. My other friend's out there in Dubai pursuing his career. And it's like, if you're just in love with your own journey, I think that's quite liberating in a sense where no one's trying to look over each other's shoulders.
Yeah, that's a good point. The only person that you should be competing against with is yourself. And a comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison's the thief of happiness. I think that's really important as well.
Comparison's the thief of all joy.
But it's also hard when you've got, other friends that are entrepreneurs, and I've certainly suffered from it, where I've had a lot of friends who've gone and built a business, and and family members as well, and they've done very well financially, and I'm sitting there thinking, what am I doing wrong? I certainly got to a point just before I started CO2U where I seriously started to doubt whether I had what it took. Like I really kind of got to a point where I thought, do you know what, I actually think I might not have this. And I'm so glad that I found enough of it, whatever it was inside of me, to give myself one more crack at the whip, because my confidence is back now, and it's been a tough but really, really exciting journey. One final thing, because we're going to run a bit short of time in a minute. I do want to talk on as well as just we've talked a lot about money and like making money and like your aspirations to be a multi-millionaire, but for me, I mean, what is money, and why is it important? So for me, the reason I want it is the freedom. That's what attracts me to money. It buys you time, allows you to be where you want when you want, rather than for some people where it might be, I want to buy a Ferrari and drive down the high street and show my friends that boy, done good. So you say, and you've often said to me, you're like, I want to be a multi-millionaire by the time I'm 30 or whatever it is, and please don't get there before I do, because it'll be unbearable. But why?
I think, to be completely honest, I've always just wanted to like make my parents proud. Like, Jenny, that is probably like the root cause of anything I've ever done. I've wanted like my mum to turn around and say, hey, like, she's really proud of me and all the success. However, along this journey, I've realised that my mum would be proud of me if I was working at Morrison's.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with working at Morrison's, but that fuel that a lot of people have, whether it's a teacher or an old friend, that moment what you're going over in your head, and I've done it myself, like, when I get there, I'll show them and blah, blah, blah. Like that moment of you pulling up outside your teacher's house with a flash car, and you said I'd never been. At that point, they'd be like, oh, well done, mate.
Yeah.
Like, John, like that moment of like, that will never happen.
Yeah.
That never happens.
And actually, it's sad to think that if you got there, you'd sort of almost feel the need to do it. Because I often think as well about, there's plenty of people that are not motivated by money. If you're fascinated in a particular industry, like for example, if you want to be a teacher, I mean, I cannot think of anything worse. Must be one of the hardest jobs in the world, or it would be for me anyway. And also not financially rewarding, but rewarding in so many other ways. In the same way that, perhaps if you're a nurse, for example, again, I just think like I could never do something like that, but you're not the financial rewards, which should, by the way, for all of these positions be substantially higher than they are. I think it's disgusting that they're not, but you're not going into it for that reason. You're going into it to get your moments of joy, to get your rewards, to get your satisfaction from other moments. And they'll obviously, in those jobs, they'll have incredibly hard and difficult and tough times as well. But it's just it's like a different currency. Money is just like one currency, but satisfaction and it's like going working for a charity or something else. It's whatever tickles your pickle. What are you going to buy me when you become a multi-millionaire? You're going to have to buy
hair
me something.
transplant.
Yeah, well, I'll take it. Listen, I'll take it. Turkey, here I come, baby. All right, I think we should. I think we kind of more or less draw this thing to a close now. It's been a great chat. Very honest. very humble, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you back on every year or every 6 months, whatever it is, to see how you're doing and look at the journey and talk about what's been good and what hasn't been good. And if you're listening and you want to reach out to me or Elliot, just say so in the comments. I mean, even get in touch by email. Can't always promise that everyone will reply, but don't hold back. Don't not do something because you think, oh, I'll never get a response, or nobody will be interested. You'd be amazed. There's a lot of people out there that aren't willing to help you, a lot, but there's also people out there that are. Have courage, and just put yourself out there as much as you can. And like we said, anyone can do this. They just need the determination and drive.
Thank you, my friend. Had a good afternoon.
Namaste.